Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding. We thine unworthy servant here gathered together, in thy name do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and grant that we having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudice, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estate within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Seated, please. This honourable House now resume its sittings. Call of the roll.
Mr. Witter? Mr. Witter? Mr. Samuda? Mr. Holness? Dr. Clarke? Mr. Shaw? Dr. Chang? Mr. Montague? Ms. Grange? Mr. Henry? Mr. Bartlett? Mr. Mackenzie? Mr. Chuck? Mr. Darrell Vaz? Mr. Warmington? Mrs. Robinson? Mr. Hutchinson? Dr. Tufton? Mrs. Williams? Mrs. Ford? Mrs. Malahoo Ford? Mr. Spencer? Mr. Spencer? Mr. Green? Mr. Terry Long? Mr. Terry Long? Mr. Main? Mr. R. Scott? Mr. Azan? Mr. Brown? Dr. Brown Burke? Mr. Buchanan? Mr. Bunting? Mr. Bunting? Dr. Campbell? Mr. Leslie Campbell? Mr. Clarke? Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn? Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn? Mr. Daly? Mr. Daly? Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert? Dr. Dunn? Mr. Fagan? Dr. Ferguson? Mr. Golding? Dr. Guy? Ms. Hannah? Mr. Hales? Mrs. Holness? Sure. Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kellier, Dr. McNeil, Ms. Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Michael Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Redmond, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Stewart, Reverend Thwaites, Mrs. Vaz, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Wright.
Statements, Minister. Announcements. Is your statement, Minister?
Mr. Speaker, consistent with our procedures during the constituency debates, I am going to request that we suspend standing orders and go straight to public business to enable the members who will be speaking in the constituency debate today to speak first, so that the audience that are here to hear can have the benefit of leaving early, so that we continue the rest of the business today.
The motion is that we suspend the standing orders in order to take some public business. Those in favor? Those against? As of it.
Mr. Speaker, our first speaker today is the Member of Parliament from Eastern Portland. Who will be giving her maiden presentation in this honorable house. So I ask you to invite the fair maiden to present to us today.
Are you hearing?
I'm a bit quiet, but you know. Not crying today. Not your guy, that boy.
Mrs. Vaz,
The 100,000.
I wish to have the house quiet so the member can make her presentation.
It's working? Yes.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Driving development through action. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my East Portland family for calling and electing me as the first woman member of Parliament.
First of many terms.
To all my sisters, big and small, this moment is for you. And yes, you can be more than just Mrs. if you To my leader and Prime Minister, the builder, most honorable Brogard, thank you. Thank you for being unafraid of having a strong woman standing firmly beside you. You have shown us that you believe in the abilities of each and every woman in this Parliament and by extension Jamaica. You have appointed more women in your government than any other Prime Minister, and I'm proud to be counted among them. To my colleagues, thank you all for your support. Thank you for coming to East Portland and getting my East Portland family on the road to prosperity. To the Member of Parliament for West Portland, whom I'm blessed to be married to, my Poms, Thank you for standing with me in this partnership and supporting my dreams the way I have supported yours. You're the vase and I'm your flower. To my 5 children, you're my reason. To my action team, including my counselors, counselor caretakers, and all my workers, big up on yourself. We are here today because of unity and dedication. You have sacrificed sleepless nights, holidays, and weekends for our collective prosperity. Mr. Speaker, 2 people are missing here today. My beloved Eva May, who would have been watching me on television, and my daddy Vaz, who would have been sitting over there listening to me. Both are proudly watching from heaven. To my Twitter family, Instagram, Facebook, thank you for your overwhelming support. To all my supporters, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today in this honorable house because I've shown the people of East Portland that I can walk the walk. Seeing me walk in Fellowship, Prospect, Ferry Hill, Mansion Hill, Port Antonio have given them faith that I was the right choice as Member of Parliament. On April 4, 2019, they put that faith in the ballots, and today I stand here to show that I can talk the talk. The obvious, unceasing decline and decay I have personally witnessed as a resident of East Portland over the last 18 years provided the genesis for me to be standing here. The constituency was like a neglected child, but in a few short months since my historic win, we have been tenderly nurturing her to restore her hopes and dreams. Mr. Speaker, while the physical decline is frightening, the mental hopelessness was my greatest concern. Without hope, you cannot dream. Without dreams, you cannot achieve. These past 8 months, we have been working unceasingly, targeting 7 key areas to action East Portland's development: education, roads, housing, water and agriculture, tourism, social and economic development, environment and sanitation. Mr. Speaker, without education, I would not be standing here today. Education is my passion, which is why I founded the One Jamaica Foundation that has been working not only in Portland, but across Jamaica to improve the infrastructure of our schools. Mr. Speaker, it was with joy that I donated my first month's salary, which was matched to allow 2 students to enter university this year. This government believes in education, and my East Portland family is no different. Labor for learning has never been more evident. We have done several projects, and I'll mention a few in the interest of time to show how we have taken action in education. 7 million from CDF have been spent on education. 4 back-to-school treats and health fair across the constituency, catering to over 3,000 children and adults. Through the One Jamaica Foundation, we have renovated the non-such basic school for over $400,000. 2 students benefited from the JLP bursary, totaling $400,000. We donated numerous computers, paint, whiteboards across the constituency. Mr. Speaker, we distributed trophies to the top-performing PEP students to underscore the importance of their achievement. Mr. Speaker, having class may be good, but I can tell you from my experience, building, filling, and improving classrooms is better. Mr. Speaker, I vividly recall in March this year meeting an elderly woman who told me how she was dressed in her finest one Sunday morning and walking to church, her head held high with her Bible in her hand. Her Sunday morning, however, was shattered when she stumbled over a rocky road and landed flat on her back. Tears came to my eyes as she told me how she had to drag herself out of the dirt and walk back home to change her clothes and return on the same road to church. Mr. Speaker, going to church should not be an obstacle course. Truth be told, donkeys will have problems on the roads we have in East Portland. Proper roads are critical for economic development. Good roads are a necessity for us all. Our farmers need good roads, and good roads are critical for tourism development. Isaiah 62 verse 10 says, go through the gates, clear the way for the people, build up the highway, remove the stones, lift up a standard over the people. Here is a list of things we have done to take action about our roads. The signing of the East Portland leg of the South Coast Highway for over $1 billion, with ground broken for road rehabilitation from Audley to Long Road and Manchinill to Fair Prospect. Repairs were done on Pastor Lane and Fisherman's Beach by Drapers. Through the NHT, the Anchovy Scheme roads and drainage was completely rehabilitated. The community center will be upgraded under the second phase of this project. Drainage and road works valued at $25 million in Anchovy land settlement is to commence. We constructed a box culvert to alleviate flooding in Weybridge, Manchinill. We provided shingle for a number of roads to alleviate the worst part of these roads for the people who traverse them daily. A $70 million hot mix patching program is in progress. Resurfacing of Rada Road, Hospital Road, and library parking lots to be commenced. In addition to roads, bridges are critical. Mr. Speaker, one of the first things I did as caretaker was the reconstruction of the much traversed and dilapidated train line bridge, which was a danger to our children and adults. Mr. Speaker, when I held my party campaign in the 2016 local government elections, I came upon the East Palm Bridge, which was closed for over a year at the time and would have been a priority for fixing had we won that election. Mr. Speaker, I was in disbelief when Minister Darrell Vaz forwarded a letter to me last November, written by a concerned citizen who, in his moment of desperation, reached out to get the bridge fixed. This was shocking to me, as this is a major bridge in a tourism town in the midst of school and numerous businesses. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to state that through collective efforts and despite setbacks, this critical bridge will be opened in a few weeks. Action to that. Mr. Speaker, one of the 5 basic human needs is the need for shelter. No parish can be prosperous without its citizens having affordable housing solutions. Let me tell you how we are actioning housing. Mr. Speaker, the last major government housing development in the parish was between 20 and 30 years ago. I am pleased to announce today that based on discussions with the National Land Agency and the National Housing Trust, they have identified 131 acres of land at Norwich Pacific Gardens, opposite Case, to develop 300 housing solutions, including service lots, studios, and 2-bedroom housing. The estimated pre-design cost is a whopping $3.84 billion. This, Mr. Speaker, is easily one of the largest investments in the history of East Portland. Mr. Speaker, the preliminary professional procurement has started with a projected construction date for November 2020. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to announce that the existing Pasley Gardens unfinished subdivision will also be part of the work to be undertaken by the NHT. This will see the completion of roads, water, and drainage in exchange for unsold lots in the subdivision. Mr. Speaker, this will benefit persons who bought and built homes and have been suffering for years. Mr. Speaker, this major announcement will allow for public servants and ordinary citizens to access affordable housing and now live and work in Portland. Action, do that. Mr. Speaker, water is life. The effects of climate change is transforming my beautiful parish from one of the wettest in Jamaica to one of the driest. We have to take action. When we started working in East Portland, there were pipes with no connection, much less water. In some instances, dry pipes would have been an improvement because no pipes existed. We had to take action because, Mr. Speaker, it is unacceptable that in 2019, residents are not receiving regular water supply in their homes. Some places like Stony Hill have not received water for over 10 years. I am proud to say that with our action and National Works Water Commission, the Stony Hill residents and residents of adjoining communities are now receiving regular water supply. Under my watch and with our efforts, Norwich Heights is now receiving water once per week after over 10 years of dry pipes. Thanks to rural water supply, Cornwall Barracks' 21 million water development project is in progress. The main pipe will be expanded to extend service to Bellevue. In collaboration with Rural Water, we have provided a total of 8 tanks to improve water services across the constituency. A 52,000 gallon tank was provided in Sherwood Forest by the National Water Commission. Additionally, 30 tanks were delivered to schools, farmers, and constituents. Mr. Speaker, exploratory work has begun in Islington for a new source of water, as the one we are using now, I can tell you from personal experience, is not fit for human consumption. This new well is anticipated to adequately service areas from Ferry Hill all the way to Mansion Mill. The water shortages in East Portland not only affect residents, it has hit the farming community especially hard. This adds to the fact that the agriculture sector, already burdened by issues of inadequate infrastructure.
Give my 15 minutes. When I talk.
Mr. Speaker, the term beautiful words alone won't help people. What she is enunciating is words and action put together. I think, therefore, in light of the fact that it is her first presentation,
Yes, sir. Yes.
I move that her time be extended for 10 minutes to enable her to come.
Yes. Those in favor? Aye.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it.
I thank this House for their indulgence. Mr. Speaker, this adds to the fact that the agricultural sector was already burdened by issues of inadequate infrastructure and a shortage of farm supplies. To this end, we have taken action on agriculture. Bermuda and Clear Spring farm roads were fixed. Tom's Hope Road rehabilitation will begin, thanks to Minister Mackenzie, at a cost of $30 million. 1.7 million of CDF was dispersed to assist 17 farm groups and another 1.2 to come. We have constructed a new bathroom facility at the Fisherman's Beach for our fisher folks in Manchiniel to replace the one that was completely dilapidated, unsafe and unsanitary. 350,000 was provided for drought relief, which we used to provide tanks, fertilizer and seeds for our farmers. The Jamaica Social Investment Fund will undertake a $56 million upgrade of the water supply to commence in April. This will dramatically improve the Rio Grande water supply, a boost to our farmers. Our action do that. Mr. Speaker, as you all know, Portland is the birthplace of tourism in Jamaica. Over the past 32 years, nothing has been done to build on this foundation. I believe the investment on Navy Island and Dragon Bay will come when we have better access by land, sea and air, and issues surrounding water and sewage are no longer at crisis level. Portland is loved at home and abroad. She's the jewel in Jamaica's crown. Let me tell you how we are actioning tourism. Port Antonio will receive 11 cruise ships by year end. We already welcome 6. In the first quarter of next year, work on the road from Fellowship to Berrydale, our rafting area, has been approved for rehabilitation at a cost of $36 million by the Tourism Enhancement Fund. Mr. Speaker, I'm thankful to the Ministry of Tourism for their pension scheme program, which will benefit our long-suffering tourism workers in East Portland. We are working assiduously with the Port Authority for East Harbour to become a port of choice. The Port Authority is evaluating the viability of dredging the harbour to accommodate larger cruise ships. This will bring much needed economic boost to the constituency. James Bond was not the first, nor will it be the last movie to be filmed in East Portland. Cocktail comes to mind, as we have a place for every scene imaginable. Mr. Speaker, beautiful speaking is not going to revitalize the tourism sector. It is underway. Our action do that. Mr. Speaker, we have taken action to help restitch the torn social fabric within my constituency. We have taken steps to provide relief for the indigent, unattached youths, and provide opportunities for sports and community development in several areas across the constituency. This is how we action social and economic development. We completed a tour with the Universal Access Fund for free Wi-Fi to be made available in the town of Port Antonio. Action to that. 140 women were transported to Kingston to receive free mammogram screening. Several have serious breast issues, and this will be addressed. Mr. Speaker, we have sought approval for the construction of 2 ATM machines, one by the Manchiniel Police Station, because the closest one is 32 kilometers in either direction, and the other at Case to facilitate the students and the surrounding community. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to announce that the ATM in Manchiniel has been approved and construction will begin shortly. We had the inaugural staging of the Anne-Marie Vaz Women's League Anne-Marie Vaz Women's Football League in February of this year. This, Mr. Speaker, will be an annual event for our women in sports. One shining star from this league, Kerry San Lawrence, scored 23 goals and went on to represent Jamaica in China with the national team. Yes, complete rehabilitation of Moortown Playfield and construction of a cultural center is currently in progress. We donated over $900,000 in cash and material to aid the construction of the Boston Skating Park. founded the Action Women's Movement and launched the Portland chapter of the Young Jamaica. We donated $250,000 to the Islington Community Center. 200 youths are in skill training under the Heart Trust NTA program. Over 100 ladies receive sanitary care packages. Young ladies across our constituency are invited to come to our office to privately receive their monthly care packages. Monthly provision of care packages for 100 Shateen residents. 350 will be distributed this month. 320 was distributed last December. Construction of a football field and clubhouse in Nonsuch is in progress. We have distributed footballs, wheelchair, mattresses, building supplies for over 600 residents across the constituency. As you all know, and was announced by Minister Mackenzie, an additional block is under construction at the Portland Infirmary to take care of our less fortunate. We built one bus stop and completely refurbished another to shelter our people. We assisted over 100 small businesses and provided employment for over 1,500 workers through the poverty reduction and the CDF. Mr. Speaker, economic activity and ambitious hopes and dreams cannot take place in an unsanitary environment. Prosperity cannot take place in an unsanitary environment. As such, here are the actions taken to make Portland clean and green. We have initiated through TPDCO in collaboration with NSWMA continuous beautification and bushing program from Ferry Hill to Long Bay and Mansion Hill. Partnered with solid waste for a constituency-wide bulk cleanup and did extensive beach cleanup along our coastline. We have transformed the dump by Titchfield into a pocket park and clean up Foreshore Road and install benches, and it is now a pleasure to see people sitting on these benches and viewing the beautiful East Harbour. We have done drain cleaning across the constituency in over 15 major areas after decades of neglect. Garbage skips were constructed and beautifully painted in 7 major areas, along with distribution of over 20 metal garbage drums. Our vector control is well advanced and poses no danger to the vector control workers. Mr. Speaker, action does not stop here. We are looking ahead to bring even more development through action in the coming year. We have embarked on the following major projects which will come on stream within the next few months. Approximately 3 water shops to be built, Nonsuch catchments to be extended, road at Stanton Hardcourt will begin January 6, major rehabilitation of Chili Lane, Seamans Valley, and the list goes on. Mr. Speaker, let me wrap up, because I could take another 10 minutes. Mr. Speaker, I am committed to doing the work to make East Portland realize its full potential. We are laying the foundation for prosperity one project at a time. We are bringing development through action. The people want prosperity, not promises. A promise is a comfort to a fool. Mr. Speaker, of all that we have done, our best achievement is the renewing the feeling of hope. A new wind is blowing across East Portland. Hope is growing. Prosperity is no longer just a word. We can feel it, and so can my people in East Portland. Mr. Speaker, we are taking action, but much more action is needed so that prosperity can be owned by each and every one of the 49,850 plus residents of East Portland. In closing, Mr. Speaker, let me remind this honorable House and Jamaica by extension. Beautiful speaking can't put food on table. Beautiful speaking can't put water in a pipe. Beautiful speaking can't build road. Beautiful speaking can't pay your supermarket bill or send your picnic to school. Action to that. One love, one Jamaica. God bless.
Mr. Samuda. Mr. Samuda, before you. Members, I must.
The Ras dead.
Order, please. Mrs. Ross, I must apologize for not recognizing your councillors and the number of workers that came with you today. We want to welcome you to Parliament and ask the Parliament to recognize you, President. And more so your family that is here with you. Please recognize them. Please.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, the only disappointment in what just transpired.
Order, please.
The only disappointment in what just transpired is the expression on the members opposite. It seems from their expression that they realize that they have lost something for good. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am now going to invite you to call on one of our young members of Parliament himself. Young, not someone who has spoken that young, but a member from southern Manchester, Mr. Michael Stewart, to make his contribution to the debate.
That's true. Mr. Stewart, before you start, I overlooked that you also have a number of families and friends, colleagues here. And will you recognize her, President, please? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, it is indeed a signal honor and a distinguished pleasure to rise in this honorable house to once again make my contribution to the constituency debate. I want to give God thanks for his love and his blessings and for having protected me so far. I must thank my party leader for once again including me as part of his team and wish for him God's grace as he leads this great party to another victory. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank members of my family, especially my wife Vivian, who is sitting in the gallery, for her tremendous love and support over these 4 years. I want to thank members of my executive, my councillors and caretakers for the role they continue to play. To my staff at the office, the citizens of South Manchester, you are the reason why I'm here. You're the reason why I will continue to serve you. I will continue to serve you with vim, vigor, and vitality as I represent your concerns in this honorable house. Mr. Speaker, South Manchester is a deep rural constituency which has really paid its fair share in national development. The citizens are a set of hard-working, committed, dedicated and conscientious persons who strive against the odds like several other Jamaicans on a daily basis. They believe that education is that ladder for upward social mobility. They continue to instill good social responsibility in their children. And so, Mr. Speaker, I continue to invest in the educational growth and development of the constituency. This academic year, a total of $6 million was used to provide assistance for over 100 students at the tertiary level. Over 200 students receive assistance with PEP books and payment for CSEC subjects. The constituency currently has 15 students at CMU, 40 attending universities, whether it is at UWI, UTech, or NCU. Several others are enrolled in every teacher training institutions across the country, and all are doing well. The Member of Parliament continues to assist them with tuition through his CDF. Mr. Speaker, one of the flagship programs in the constituency is our Breakfast program. Approximately $1.3 million was spent to provide breakfast items for 19 basic schools, 21 primary schools, 3 high schools in the constituency. This breakfast program has resulted in improvement in attendance rate, the punctuality rate, and greater outcome in the teaching learning process. The schools, the students, and the teachers and the parents continue to sing the praise of this well-needed initiative, especially in cases where the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has fallen short on this commitment. Several schools were assisted with repairs to doors, windows, kitchen, and partitions for classrooms. The constituency currently has over 50 unattached youths in training at the Newport VDTI Training Institute. There are several others who are waiting anxiously to get into an institution to pursue their dreams. A tremendous thanks to the administration and teachers of the Southeast Training Institute and Newport, Winston Jones High School, the Cross Keys High School, for taking on the job to train these young people. Mr. Speaker, I presented 70 birth certificates to students under the citizens recently who never had any. This was done without any zones of special operations. You see, we don't need this type of operations to present birth certificates and other things to our young people and citizens in our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, I have consistently requested that the ministry equip the high schools with the necessary gadgets to ensure that more of our young people have more training opportunities. During the year, Mr. Speaker, 3 new high schools were completed in the constituency. The New Forest Primaries received a new school, as it had to sever ties with the high school. The Campbell's Castle Primary received a new block consisting of several classrooms, staff room, principal's office. The Harmons Infant School received a new school. These were made possible through the MP's consistent representation. Thanks to the Chase Fund and the Japanese government for their assistance and their tremendous contribution to the constituency. New Forest High School and the primary school also received a bus, a brand new bus to take our students to school. I attended several site development workshops in the constituency, along with student leadership seminar in behavior management. And this is one of the reasons why we don't have some of these maladaptive behavior being displayed in our social media, because we reach them at an early age. South Manchester Principals Association continues to share best practices, and this has proven to be a great success. My principals lunching with them, meeting with them on a regular basis and hearing their cries and assisting in this regard has been very successful. Through a partnership with the Social Development Commission in the school, several schools receive hard court, netball courts, and this has been assisting in our sports program. The Cross Keys High School has produced some of the greatest cricketers in the parish. As a Member of Parliament, I have been able to provide sporting gears and other equipment for the teams. Winston Jones has benefited. Harmon's Community Club has benefited. South Stars Cricket Club has benefited. The Marcus Garvey Cricket Club has benefited. I've also sponsored several corner leagues with playing gears in association with my councillors and caretakers. Half of the team members from the B.B. Coke High School who were victorious in the Ben Francis Cup on Saturday are from the constituency of South Manchester. I was happy to provide a bus to take them into St. James, where they really showed their dexterity and other skills. Mr. Speaker, they say gratitude is a must. And here I must express sincere thanks and appreciation to the Honourable Minister of Sports, Honourable Babs Grange, for providing funds for the construction of a beautiful playfield in Alligator Pond. Minister, this is highly appreciated, and I thank you on behalf of the Alligator Pond citizens and the young people who are now benefiting from that lovely sporting arena that has been laid there. Mr. Speaker, I will now look briefly on our farmers. It has been postulated, Mr. Speaker, that any country that can feed itself is a rich country. Some of the most dedicated farmers in the country, however, the perennial dry seasons wreaks havoc on these poor farmers. It is said that if you stand for a short while in the Bossa property in South Manchester, food will grow on your feet. Such is the fertility of the soil. All the farmers need is water. As some of the farm roads leading to the property continue to improve, there is now a dire need to look at roads from the Bossa Lane end leading to the property. Mr. Speaker, the Judah Minister has been assisting, but I would want the Minister to consult when he comes into the constituency. We don't want the Nicodemus-style visit to the constituency. It only serves to divide the farmers who are there, and we can ill afford that at this time. During the year, I was able to repair 2 farm roads. The Berry Hill and the Horse Pass farm roads, which were well needed, are now repaired, much to the delight of the farmers. The Duff House New Forest Agro Park is yet to realize its full potential. While the farmers are affected periodically by the beet armyworm, they continue to be resilient. The powers that be must give greater support to the agro park, which was once the best agro park in the island. The farmers have not gone anywhere. All they are crying out is for greater assistance. The roads within the park have deteriorated severely. The farmers need longer hours of water through their sprinklers. The farmers also need better market for their produce. Mr. Speaker, consideration must be given to agro-processing. The farmers have had several consultations and deliberations with RADA and other bodies within the Ministry of Agriculture, Commerce and Fisheries to no avail. I continue to speak to the ministers about getting the agro-park, getting a processing facility, and we will be relentless in our quest to ensure that we get such a facility in that part of the constituency. Mr. Speaker, there is a brand new facility which has been unused for over 5 years. The farmers have been requesting that the facility be equipped with agro-processing gadgets. I once again echo the call and the sentiments of the farmers for this facility to be equipped for agro-processing. Too much of what the farmers produce goes to waste whenever there is a glut. Roads. The matter of bad roads in the constituency is of grave concern. 4 of the worst corridors, Mr. Speaker, are Downs to Alligator Pond, St. Toulis to Reeveswood, Reeveswood to Harmons. Areas such as the Spring Grove, Meadsfield, Ellison, and parts of Swibby's Hope are crying out for help. Mr. Speaker, the corridor from Downs to Alligator Pond, which was recently blocked. This incident caused major disruption in schools, the business community, shoppers, and the general commuting public. Such is the poor condition of the road that the world-famous eatery, Little Oche, Bunch of Grapes, and Oswald, to name a few, have been impacted negatively. Mr. Speaker, the Alligator Pond Fishing Village is the fastest growing area on the South Coast, but sad to say the tourism product is being damaged. Our brand is being damaged. Mr. Minister, I ask for your assistance there, and we have spoken about it already, and I know that you're an honorable man, and you will come to a rescue to those hard-working citizens in Alligator Pond. Mr. Speaker, how does one justify the repairing of roads next door to Downs, which are not heavily trafficked as the Alligator Pond Road Downs corridor. They get carpet, while the citizens of Downs Alligator Pond have nowhere to drive. This kind of neglect to rural constituencies does not augur well for holistic and national development. The Bustle Lane in South Manchester, which a truck traverses on a weekly basis from South Manchester and Southeast St. Elizabeth to Coronation Market with produce, is in poor condition. The truck drivers are having a rough time. The farmers are suffering. The citizens who use these corridors are distraught. Several requests have been made by me to the National Works Agency without any success. I'm making a special appeal for these roads to be repaired. The citizens of South Manchester deserve no less. They need some of the carpet, especially since they have contributed significantly to the country's economy. Mr. Speaker, despite these challenges, Mr. Speaker, I was able to carry out repairs through my CDF on Gibbs Avenue and Ellis Street in Porus. The Claremont Road in the Alligator Pond Division is now being rehabilitated. Thanks to Alpine, Gisco, and Jamalco for assisting with MAL. The corridor from Swibis Hope to Blackgate was recently rehabilitated. Anderson Road, St. Toulis, and part of the St. Toulis Road were repaired. A section of the road from Farm to Baker Shop in the constituency was also repaired. Mr. Speaker, bauxite mining in South Manchester has contributed significantly to the national economy. However, the constituency has nothing to show for the sacrifices they have made. The constituency has a worse infrastructure. The roads are in deplorable condition. There is no pipe water supply in the mining areas. As a Member of Parliament, I continue to meet with the bauxite mining companies to seek assistance. However, they referred to the bauxite levy and the newly cost-sharing scheme in the bauxite industry, which has not been fully explained to the country. I therefore ask the Minister of Finance, who is sitting right across there, to quickly explain to us the bauxite cost-sharing scheme to ensure that the 14 bauxite mining constituencies, and especially South Manchester, gets their share of the pie. Mr. Speaker, I also call upon the government to have a heart. The citizens of South Manchester are worse off because of bauxite mining. The flora and fauna have been destroyed. Their fruit trees are no more. Their coffee and pimento trees are no more. Their citrus trees are gone. The income from these crops are no more. The constituency once produced the best sweet potato in the world. This is now becoming an endangered species. As the lands have been mined out.
Mr. Samuda, the member's time for speaking expired.
Mr. Speaker, today is a very special day. So today, in keeping with what transpired earlier, I ask that the members' time be extended for a period of 10 minutes to enable them to come.
Those in favor? Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. I therefore call upon the Jamaica Bauxite Institute to monitor these communities more closely. The mined-out pits have been left open for years and need attention. And therefore call on the JBI also to establish an office in the parish in order to monitor these regular breaches. An office in Kingston, I dare say, cannot, in all fairness, provide close scrutiny. Several persons who were relocated more than 2 decades have still not been able to get their titles. I have tabled a motion in this honorable House on the 17th of November. Mr. Speaker, I'm calling for the motion to be debated in order to bring closure to some of these outstanding matters. Mr. Speaker, consultations are now being held with farmers to look at growing alternative crops in these mine-out areas. Crops such as oil nut and cassava can be planted, but the farmers need governmental support. And Minister of Agriculture is right here, and I know that he is an honorable man and will come to assist us in these parts of the constituency. Water. The upgrade of the Victoria Town Krusky's water scheme has been on the books for a mighty long time. Promises made have not been kept. Bauxite mining has destroyed the tanks, and the quality of the water which remains in these tanks are not fit for human consumption. A tremendous portion of my CDF is spent each year for trucking waters to these areas. Mr. Speaker, a large section of the Mount Pelly housing scheme in my constituency, which never had running water since it was built, now has piped water. Gibbs Avenue in Porus now has piped water. Residents of Old Porus now have reliable supply of water, thanks to the NWC for listening to my cry and heeding the cry of the citizens. The road to Hampton Road Pumping Station was recently renovated after years of begging. I say thanks once more to the NWC, the Municipal Corporation, for sitting with me and listening and for really carrying out the work during these times. Thanks also to Rural Water. The Ellen Street to Blenheim Town catchment tanks have been repaired. Pipelines are now in place and residents have portable water. Garbage collection. Mr. Speaker, the issue of garbage collection is a sore point in the constituency. The Newport area, the fishing village in Alligator Pond are areas which need special attention. And I'm sorry that the minister is not here, but we need to have some regular pickup in these areas. I hear you, Minister, and I thank you for your support and your concerns. Electricity. There are still too many areas in the constituency which are still without electricity. A document presented to the Member of Parliament last week by the Honourable Minister, sitting over there, showed that there are some 36 areas that are without electricity. This is indeed backward. In this 21st century and in the fourth industrial revolution, we need to have many more of our homes, Minister, electrified. And I will submit the list to you, and I hope that we will move with alacrity to get these areas electrified. Mr. Speaker, lands for the Downs Health Center, which was allocated by Alpart some 2 decades ago, are still sitting fallow and bare. The Southern Regional Health Authority has a diagram for a Type 3 health center for some time now. The Honourable Minister of Health informed me that the challenges at the Cornwall Regional Hospital had caused great fiscal strain on his budget, hence the delay. Minister, the citizens of Downs, New Forest, Alligator Pond, Plowden, Prospect, Duff House, Sea Air, Turnerstop, Farm, Blakespen, and other surrounding communities cannot wait any longer, Mr. Speaker. Minister, in his absence, I urge you as a citizen of Manchester to do something for your fellow Manchesterian and to get that health center up at the earliest possible time. Security issues. Mr. Speaker, there are 5 police stations in the constituency. 3 of them are without proper service vehicles. The Porus Police Station, which mans the gateway to Manchester and to the western end of the island, does not have a proper service vehicle. This is of grave concern. Mr. Speaker, the Alligator Pond Police Station does not have a proper service vehicle. Neither does the Asia Police Station. Thanks to the Wigton Wind Farm, which donated 2 service vehicles to the Krusky's Police Station, who donated 1 to the Newport Police Station. Mr. Speaker, the citizens of South Manchester don't want to wait until there is an upsurge in crime before they start crying out for their service vehicle. And I ask the Honourable Minister of National Security to heed the advice and the call of the citizens. Mr. Speaker, like my other colleagues who spoke before me, I join in the call for an increase in the Constituency Development Fund in order to serve our constituents better. The demand of the Constituency Development Fund cannot stretch, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of this Honourable House, we are all elected to represent and serve our constituencies with love, respect, dignity, and honesty. We must continue to be good role models for the young people in our respective constituencies. We must continue to seek to improve their social and economic conditions and create opportunities for self-sufficiency and equal opportunities for all. We must also remember those who have served us well and in their winter of their lives. They need our support. Mr. Speaker, to this end, I pledge my commitment, love, and devotion to the people of South Manchester and pledge to work to improve their social and economic welfare of everyone. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I leave with you and this honorable House a word from the good book found in Micah 6, verse 8, which says, "He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." Mr. Speaker, may God bless us. May God bless Jamaica land we love. I pledge my support and my continued work with the citizens and Jamaica, and especially South Manchester, as we move forward to build a good constituency and a good country. I thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir Michael. Mr. Speaker, we want to thank the member for a fine presentation. Well done. Well done. Well done. He's a good speaker and he works hard. Mr. Speaker, now you can now move on. Recommittal.
The request
of
Mr. Samuda, you have to request a recommittal.
Recommittal, yes, I'm asking for a recommittal of the items that we suspended.
The motion is that we return to we suspend debate that we were for next week, and we recommit to the sitting. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Mr. Samuda.
I understand what you have just said, that we suspend the debate. Oh, I see. They suspend the constituency debate. Oh, I see. Fine. Okay, thank you very much. And then we resume the agenda by way of a recommittal. Thank you.
We were at announcements. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Ministry Paper number 79, entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues, 2nd September 2019. Ministry Paper number 80, Cabinet Agenda Issues, 9 September 2019. Ministry Paper number 81, entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues, 18 and 23 September 2019. Ministry Paper number 82, entitled The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone Social Intervention. Ministry Paper number 83, The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Mount Salem Zone Social Intervention, September 1, 2017 to November 28, 2019. The Emergency Powers number 22, Continuance number 3, Resolution 2019. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation number 6, Order 2019. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation number 6, Order Resolution 2019. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone, Extension of Period Operation number 6, Order 2019. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone. Extension of period of operation number 6, Order Resolution 2019. General Consumption Tax Amendment number 2, Regulations 2019. Annual Report of the National Solid Waste Management Authority for the year 2018-2019.
Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate to the Honorable House of Representatives. I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 29th day of November 2019, a bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Minimum Business Tax Act was passed in the Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares Vinson, QC CD JP, President of the Senate, December 3, 2019.
Petitions, reports from committees, notices of motion given orally.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move, be it resolved that the General Consumption Tax Amendment number 2, Regulations 2019, under the General Consumption Tax, which was laid on the table of the House on the 3rd day of December 2019, be referred to the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Questions and answers to questions. Mr. Samuda.
Mr. Speaker, we have 3 answers here today. The first will be the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would seek for you to request of the House Leader as to what has happened to question 42, which is due for answering today by the Honourable Minister of Health.
The move of the question.
I am.
Then you have to ask the Prime Minister.
I'm sorry? No. No, you didn't hear seemingly. I'm asking what has happened to the question standing on my name, which was supposed to be answered today by the Honourable Minister of Health.
You know, the question, you're quite right, was supposed to be answered today. The Minister of Health, unfortunately, is involved in a matter of some urgency, and as a result, will not be able to answer that question today. But I assure you that at the next sitting of the House, it will be answered. Absolutely. Mr. Speaker, there is a question asked of me, and I invite you to ask the member from Central Manchester. He would now put the question.
Mr. Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Minister without portfolio with responsibility for education, youth and information, and Leader of the House to answer question 36 with regards to the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts, standing in my name.
first question, what is the status of the principal suspension and proposed hearing? And what are the specific allegations of misconduct for which the principal has been suspended? This is in regards to the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts. The answer: the board had received formal complaints against the principal alleging that she had failed to act properly in handling allegations of sexual harassment which had been brought to her attention. In an effort to properly investigate the matter, the board invited the principal to take leave. The principal declined the invitation, and as a result, the board asked, in accordance with education regulations, suspending her pending the conclusion of the investigation and hearing. The charges laid against the principal are as follows: neglect of duty, gross inefficiency, and such other conduct that may amount to professional misconduct.
Ms. Curtis.
The details of the charges, which were laid out in a letter of July 24, 2019, was sent to the principal. The Personnel Committee of the Board will convene the hearing shortly. We must recall that these answers were provided prior to most recent developments in that particular case. 2. What has been the outcome of the 3 hearings to date for the staff member accused of sexual harassment? And what are the associated costs to the college for legal fees? Answer: 3 hearings have been completed to date in relation to allegations made against the staff member in question. At the end of the first 2 hearings, the staff member was admonished and censured according to regulations 57.5b1 of the Education Regulations 1980 for professional misconduct and inappropriate behavior. The 3rd hearing has just been completed, and the report from the Personnel Committee has been submitted and ratified by the board for action to be taken. The costs associated with the hearings are outlined below. Legal fees, $2.02975. $2 million. Well, I know you'll understand that I don't have to go into the .0 and all that. Yeah. Stenographer, $551,000. Meeting expense, $265,000. Total expense to date, $2.4 million. What measures have the ministry and/or the board put in place to address the concerns of staff and students at the college regarding the issue of sexual harassment? Answer: the board has set up an email address which allowed persons affected to submit their complaints. This address was independent of the school's management. Numerous complaints have been received via this medium. In addition, several seminars were hosted with members of staff to sensitize them to issues concerning sexual harassment. A committee consisting of a wide cross-section of stakeholders from the college revised the institution's sexual harassment policy. The document has benefited from external review and feedback from industrial relations specialists and board directors. The feedback provided has been used to update the draft. The document will be finalized by January 2020. The minister is appointing an external committee to do a separate investigation on all matters relating to the Edna Manley College of the Visual Arts visual and performing arts. 4. Has the Minister responded to the September 16, 2019 letter signed by all heads of schools and directors of departments on behalf of the staff, expressing no confidence in the board chairman and their grave concerns regarding procurement breaches involving members of the board? Answer. A first meeting was held with myself as chairman and members of the board, which included staff representatives, the registrar and acting principal, and the vice principal for academic affairs. Several issues were ventilated at that meeting and directives given regarding several of the matters raised. The issues were ventilated during the meeting, and on the recommendation of the minister, i.e. myself, the board has constituted a reconciliation and stakeholder engagement committee which has been tasked with improving relations and communication among the board, the staff and students in an effort to address the current impasse. I am currently scheduling a meeting with members of the academic staff to discuss the issue directly addressed in the letter referenced. 5. Is the minister satisfied that all members of the board are suitably qualified, including being fit and proper, as required by the college's scheme order, given recent revelations at the Parliament's Public Administration and Appropriation Committee of disciplinary action taken against a board member who is employed to an agency of the government? Answer. I ensured that due diligence was carried out in the appointment of the new board of the college in accordance with its scheme order. The ministry has not received any formal information or evidence relating to the matters raised in the recent sitting of the PAAC regarding a member of the board, and is therefore unable to respond to the question posed. I believe that that is more anecdotal than factual and presented to me formally.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Bounty.
I have a number of follow-up questions. And Mr. Speaker, I would just, for your benefit and the members' benefit, emphasize that what we're speaking about here is not an ordinary school. The Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts is the region's most reputable arts institution. It's an enterprising art and culture which, given our history, its role must be understood as revolutionary and important. So how we treat with this institution, Mr. Speaker, has regional implications in addition to national. But with respect to the first question, or the answer to the first question, Mr. Speaker, what the minister has outlined here unfortunately fits a disturbing pattern that we have seen in many other agencies in government, including agencies like Petrojam, where a board comes in, dismisses professionals with long service, and as an excuse or as a way to put one of their cronies in the job. And then the abuse of the organization begins. So we have, Mr. Speaker, the minister has outlined a case which is a clear witch hunt. They have suspended the principal, someone who has dedicated their career to the institution, starting there as a student, being previously the Dean of Dance with high commendation, having served as a principal since 2012. And we are not aware of any negative performance evaluation. But she's suspended first, doing grave damage to her reputation, and the board is now off to look to find reasons why they suspended her. 5 months later, we're in the 5th month, and they have not even convened a hearing. This is an abuse of due process. This is unjust. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask specifically, since the principal's appointment in 2012, have successive boards conducted performance evaluations? And prior to this, has there been any negative communication, any warning letters to the principal raising any concerns about her performance in the job? I now turn to the answer to the second question, Mr. Speaker. Or perhaps I will pause here and allow the minister to respond to the first couple questions.
First of all, you must understand she has not been dismissed. And I want to make it absolutely clear. I want to make it absolutely clear to you and the members of this honorable house that as long as I have overall responsibility for the Edna Manley School of Visual and Performing Arts, anyone who has served for that length of time will get a fair hearing. Categorically. But the purpose, and those of us who have served at this level will know that the purpose of establishing a board is to vest in that board the authority to investigate and report. I have not received a report on the basis of the work done by the board. Okay, I might admit here that the length of time may be a bit protracted, but I will see to it that the matter is brought as urgently as possible in light of the concerns expressed. Let me make that clear. But as far as the treatment of, the whole question of natural justice and the need to be heard and clearly understood will be protected by the leadership at the Edna Manley as long as I am the person with responsibility. So they can be assured of that.
Mr. Speaker, this is analogous to the police arresting and charging someone and then going to do the investigation of the alleged crime. That is totally inappropriate in terms of the sequence of the process. It's contrary to natural justice, and you who are speaking should be very sensitive to natural justice at this point. Mr. Speaker, the second answer, or the answer to question 2, we're halfway through the hearings of the staff member who was accused of this sexual harassment. So far, the staff member has been admonished and censored. They're the principal accused, and yet, or let me say, they're the primary person accused, and yet the person who is only alleged to have not dealt with it administratively, effectively, is on suspension, a more serious consequence than the person who the allegations have been made against. Again, this does not seem to be natural justice. The only person that it seems to be benefiting is the person collecting the legal fees. We're halfway through the hearing of one person. It's already cost 2.8 million. This suggests it will be probably 6 million by the time this hearing is done. And let me ask, who is the attorney that's representing the college, the personnel committee in this matter? And how do you see, Minister, that the principal, the one, by the way, operating without a sexual harassment policy, because my understanding is that the institution has never, up to now, had a sexual harassment policy. So the principal is left in a position of trying to discipline somebody without the benefit of a policy to discipline them against. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking the Minister, who is the lawyer representing the personnel committee? One. And second, we refer to the second question, we refer to the answers to question 3, where the Minister speaks of a number of measures that have been taken. Is it not true that most of these measures, with the exception of the email address, most of these measures were actually initiated by the same principal who has been suspended? So she is the one who has attempted to get a sexual harassment policy approved by the board. She is the one that has initiated the seminars with the members of staff to sensitize them. She is the one that has gotten solicited the external review and feedback. And yet, you have listed all these things that she has done and been suspended for without acknowledgement and claim them as an action of the board and the ministry. Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Bunting.
This is dishonesty.
Mr. Bunting.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
I don't want to quarrel with you this evening, because you take it as quarrel. But you have asked some questions. You know what are the guidelines of questions. You are not a debate. Ask the minister additional questions according to what you have. You are making
That's what I'm doing.
You are making a presentation, a debate that requires a motion.
It's really bad, you know.
So if you have additional questions, pose them to the minister, let him answer.
So the question I have framed is asking the minister, with response to his answers to question 3, outlining the measures that have been taken to address the concerns of the staff and the students at the college regarding the issue of sexual harassment. Is it not true that, with the exception of setting up an email address, all these other measures were initiated by the principal who has subsequently been suspended? That's the follow-up to the answer for question 3. So there are 2 now, the name of the lawyer, and to confirm that it is the principal that initiated most of these measures to address the concerns. Maybe the minister would answer those, and I have 2 final ones.
Well, member, first of all, I am not aware that this was initiated by the principal, but I can confirm that. But my understanding is that the matter was, I can check it. My understanding is that the matter was languishing for an inordinate length of time, and the board felt that they had to expedite it because of the crescendo into which it had risen by those who were the accusers. However, member, the matter at hand is one that is now virtually concluded, because based on the recommendation and the report available to me on the disciplinary hearing before the Personnel Committee, Board of Management of the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts, the person involved has been found responsible and to put it precisely as phrased, in the circumstances, the Personnel Committee recommends by majority that as a result of the findings made, Dr. X employed ought to be terminated pursuant to Regulation 57(5)(b)(4) of the Education Regulations 1980. So in effect, what we have here is a board that has acted with alacrity and has brought the matter to conclusion. And therefore, it is something that can be, I suspect, under law appealed, and we will deal with that as it presents itself. But at the moment, that process is at an end. The other matter as to whether or not the board has engaged the services of a lawyer, I'm not aware, but it can be checked, and I will advise you as to exactly what the state of play is. But I am not aware that every issue brought before a board necessitates the board engaging a lawyer. But it happens to be that in this particular instance, a lawyer is on the board. So they benefit from the legal advice. We don't call names of people who are not in here carelessly. If you wish to ask me about it privately, I may share it with you, but I will not abuse the privilege of the person not in the house to call their name. That's why I have not so far called any names, and I don't intend to call any names. So we do have legal advice that is offered to the board, and the board has acted responsibly and has brought a conclusion to the matter.
Mr. Speaker, with reference to question 4 and the response, and this, just to remind you, was the letter dated September 16, signed by all heads of schools and directors of departments on behalf of the staff, expressing no confidence in the board chairman and their grave concerns regarding procurement breaches involving members of the board. Minister, with respect to this question, are you aware that certain directors on the board have been instructing the organization? In August, for example, a week or two before the principal was suspended, one director had to be written to with reference to a contract of award to Kaizen Management Consultants that they were being asked to sign. And the staff, the management member, raised concerns that the process that had been outlined did not follow the college's procurement policies and procedures, and went further to say, based on that, if the principal were to sign without that process, then she would be in breach of the procurement process. Coincidentally, we're being asked to believe that because the principal and her team would not go against the very policies of the institution, although being pressured by board members to do that, that they are the ones in the right when they then put the principal on suspension? Or is it not that they want to be able to do as they wish without regard to the procurement process? That is why it's and finally, Mr. Speaker, the question 5, the answer to question 5, whether the minister was satisfied that all members of the board are suitably qualified, including being fit and proper, as required by the college's scheme order. Now, the minister replied that a due diligence was carried out in the appointment of the new board. And further, that he had received no formal information or evidence relating to the matters raised. Now, Mr. Speaker, in a committee of this House, the PAAC raised the issue of a director of Edna Manley, an appointed director, who has been suspended from TPDCO on more than one occasion for sexual harassment. And the minister has conducted a due diligence and has not investigated this matter to be able to tell us today whether or not this is the case. Minister, this is negligence on your part, because this is not something new I'm just raising here. This was in the media, it was ventilated, or it was raised anyway, in a PAAC meeting. And given that this whole furor about sexual harassment, I would have thought that you would have been very careful to appoint directors who are beyond reproach. I said, has he done due diligence?
Mr. Bunting. Mr. Samuda.
Member.
Could you put your mic, Mr. Samuda, pull your mic to you. Thank you.
And I noticed that you have a coaching staff member, but we will nonetheless address the matters you have raised. A coaching staff. First of all, the board, since being appointed, have engaged in an extensive review of the procedures relating to procurement. I am not aware of the incident of which you speak, and I can say that during the meeting that I held with the acting principal and many directors and the existing board, that matter was never raised. I'm not aware of it. As for the person of whom you speak, who has been, it is alleged, engaged in sexual harassment in another organization, my information is that that person is still engaged in that other organization primarily because no evidence has been brought to show where he is guilty. We are not in the habit of ascribing guilt anecdotally, but guilt is based on facts presented. Most of what you have dealt, most of what you have relied on is anecdote. I am telling you what is factual. Now, further to your question about representation on the board that is appropriate, I am very happy. I know there will be disagreements with people when you change a popular person in an organization. Of course you're going to get disagreement. But in the meetings I've had, they have expressed themselves and been free to express themselves fulsomely. And indeed, on the question of whether we are on the right legal track, I heard we don't have one lawyer on the board, we have two. So we are well advised in terms of legal matters and the way forward, how to proceed. And so far, everything that has been done has been in accordance with the rules and regulations that govern the institution. Now, if you wish me to even, which I could not do anyway, because I'm not empowered so to do, it is dependent on the board. But if you are inviting me to influence the board in any way, based on anecdotes provided by some little sus in a corner, you won't get it from me. Come to the table. Come to the table with facts. Come to the table with facts.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm really very disappointed in the minister. He refers to a letter to the Prime Minister, who is the de jure Minister of Education, from all the heads of departments and the schools, where they say in the opening paragraph of the letter, this is what he refers to as SUS. This letter is therefore a declaration of no confidence in the chairman's leadership, as well as our objection to those unelected/appointed members who have been called to serve alongside her. The refusal of these appointments arises out of our community's concerns regarding a number of protocol and policy breaches committed by the chairman and her team during the last term of the board. These infringements have adversely affected the college's operations, public image, and student and staff morale, all exacerbated by the developments of the last few months. This is not SUS, Mr. Speaker. This is written by senior personnel in the college, and it is disrespectful of the minister to make that suggestion.
First of all, let me make it clear. I have to work with every one of those people who signed that letter. I have met with them, and I have undertaken to meet with them again. And they are expecting to meet with me.
To discuss stuff? To discuss
But
stuff?
hold on.
Order, please.
But hold on a minute. Any member on the opposition side can prepare a document expressing discontent and lack of confidence in the government. And you may even carry it so far as to attempt to overthrow the government, but will you succeed? Will you succeed? You can bring any nonsensical allegation, but will you succeed? A SUS does not always have to be verbally expressed. You're a lawyer, or have you stopped practicing? You're a lawyer, you should know better. You don't have to verbalize SUS. You can write it. I'm not disrespecting the people. When you...
Your focus is on ensuring that the institution is properly run.
Let me tell you something. I'm not going to encourage destructive commentary with respect to honest, hardworking people who are trying to make a difference. Your objective and my objective are two different things. Your objective is to undermine the integrity and stewardship of the board. My objective is to strengthen it.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
So we are not at one.
Mr. Speaker, on a
We are
point
not
of
at
order.
one in that.
I am rising on a
So
point of order.
I will not countenance your
I am
suggestion.
rising on a point
One
of
minute,
order.
Mr. Samuda.
Mr.
1 minute,
Speaker,
Mr. Samuda. Let me hear
The
it.
standing order says that
Mr.
motive should not be ascribed to any member in this House. And the House leader has ascribed motives, saying that I've set out to undermine the government. I ask him to withdraw that, to be a gentleman and withdraw that.
Well, you know that, as I indicated to you, the matter regarding the claim of sexual abuse by one person, the process has been completed, and we are. But as far as your motives are concerned, we are not on the same path. Change the word motive to objective. Withdraw. Your objective
But you have to
is to support, no, your objective is to support allegations that are inimical to the interests of the smooth running.
No, Mr. Speaker.
Of course.
The member rose on a point of order.
You're a propagandist, and I will not enjoy you. I will not enjoy you in that propaganda. Talk about withdraw. Withdraw what?
Mr. Samuda.
There's nothing to withdraw.
Mr. Samuda, Mr. Samuda.
Bring whatever violation you want to bring. I will not ascribe to your objectives.
Mr. Speaker, I think you need to bring an end to this and ask the member to withdraw the comments that he has made.
He's in breach of the standing. Don't go.
Mr. Speaker, I indicated to you that I have absolutely no intention of withdrawing from my evaluation as to the motive of the member and the objective of the member.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I think the member needs, you need to rule on it, Mr. Speaker. You need to rule on it. And the member just can't be just wrong and strong. He needs to abide by your ruling. And we hope that you'll make the correct ruling, Mr. Speaker.
You hope, members, every member has a copy of the standing order. It was sent to you by me. Mr. Hilton, I am speaking. Both sides, when questions are asked, we are not to turn them into debate. Mr. Bunting is asking some questions and asks the authority to ask further questions. I'm going to ask that minister's statement. If he's not satisfied, you ask further question or bring a resolution. Mr. Bunting, have a seat. I have not finished.
I have asked you to rule on a point of order.
Mr. Bunting, what have your problem, you know, Mr. Bunting? You disrespect the speaker. Whenever I'm speaking, I am speaking on your behalf, and you get up to disturb me. You won't even wait until I recognize you to speak. Members, it is stated clearly in the book where we ask questions and further questions without debating the issue. You have asked questions, the member have answered them. And let us go on with it in peace.
Mr. Speaker, no. That is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. The member rose on a point of order. The member indicated that the House leader was ascribing motive to his questions, improper motive, and now that he's asked him to withdraw, as is stated in the standing orders, and you have not ruled on it, Mr. Speaker.
He's made it worse.
Mr. Speaker, may I be invited to help you with something?
Order, you read what you are saying. Turn to page 16 on a statement by Minister on answers and further questions, and see if Mr. Bunting debating and making all sorts of statements is correct. Incorrect and not correct and should not be permitted.
But then if that was the case, Mr. Speaker, I should have stopped the member from that time. But it reached a stage now where, right, motive is being ascribed to the member. So we need for the House leader to withdraw.
What you should ask that both Mr. Bunting's statement and that be removed from the answer. Because he's out of order. And you're out of order, not in accordance with the standing order. That's what I mean. Not in accordance with asking further questions, which elicits statement from the minister which may be wrong, but was wrong before.
Mr. Speaker, no. I am sorry, I cannot accept your reasoning of this particular. My statement? Mr. Speaker, there is something that is not right here. It cannot be that when a member asks a question, and irrespective of whether it's a House leader or whomever is answering the question, ascribes motive to a particular comment, whether it is according to the standing orders in terms of sequence or not, whether you allowed it to go or not, the mere fact that motive is ascribed, and the member is asking for a withdrawal of that, you should rule on it. You can't have the House leader telling you, that he's not going to withdraw it, sir. You are in charge of this House, and you need a Speaker to make the necessary directive to the member of the House.
And Mr. Samuda, 1 minute. The standing order clearly states that motive must not be ascribed in the order. And if you do so, then we would ask you not to do it. But we are debating questions which should not elicit debate in the House.
Mr. Speaker, on this matter, let us remember the member from Central Manchester quoted a letter written by members of staff, including senior members of staff at the institution. No, you are not saying what I am saying. I am saying what I am saying. He quoted from a letter which was described by the acting minister as sus. Right. And he said it is improper to describe as gossip and irresponsible gossip, which is what is sus. You come from up there, you know about it. You know that it is improper to describe.
Order, please.
It is improper.
You are the master of sus. 1.6 billion worth of sus.
If they want to reduce the people's chamber to fast, you should not permit them, Mr. Speaker. It is not a debate. It is he attributed to the member improper motive, and that is in breach. There is no debate. It is required of you, Mr. Speaker, by the standing orders and the traditions of the House, that you call upon the House leader, acting minister, to withdraw his imputation. Nothing more, nothing less.
Mr. Speaker, I am an observer of this Parliament. I observed a lot of things. And in my observations, I could enunciate so many occasions on which the objective of the end, I want to broaden this to all of the opposition. When the objective of all the opposition is to undermine the government and get rid of the government. And they will go to any end. They will do anything. They will say anything that will undermine the quality of governance that is being undertaken in this country. Now, first of all, the matter that the member raised is false. And why is it false? Go and look at Hansel. I didn't say that the letter was containing sus. I said we cannot judge a situation and use as evidence sus. That is a statement that I will stand by until I die. Neither you or the whole of you can change that.
You said my objective was to undermine the government.
Categorically will not. And if you don't wish to hear me speaking here, then you follow your leader, take up your bags, and see what he is doing, heading for the door.
Mr. Speaker, it is most unfortunate that the House leader has said that. It is most unfortunate. It is most unfortunate that you have said that, Karl. And we will abide by your suggestion.
Members. Dr. Gill, Doctor, Minister of Finance. House Leader. Yeah, you must stay what's going on. Use your mic for me, please. Use your mic, please.
Mr. Speaker, the member from St. Catherine Southeast has questions standing in my name. I am proposing to table them, standing in his name to me. I am proposing to dispose of them by tabling them.
Wonderful.
Ask for recommittal of the item notices of motion given orally. Just one minute. Mr. Speaker, I ask for recommittal of the item announcements and notices of motions given orally to enable 2 more resolutions brought by the Prime Minister to be dealt with today.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we plan to table 2 sets of motions.
1 minute, Prime Minister, 1 minute.
The Emergency Powers Continuance Number 4 Resolution 2019 under the Emergency Powers Act laid on the table of the House, and the Emergency Powers Number 3 Continuance Number 3 Resolution 2019 of the Emergency Powers Act also laid on the table of the House today.
Yes, yes. 3 Zozos. Yes, and 2 Zozos, right?
given orally. Notice of motion given orally.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proposing to read into the records two sets of motions. The first set I will do, which will be on the resolution to extend the states of public emergency that are now in place, and then to extend the zones of special operations that are also currently in place. The Minister of National Security will take those two resolutions on the zones of special operations. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. First, the emergency powers continuance number 4 resolution 2019. Whereas by virtue of section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body or persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 30th day of April 2019, the Governor General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the entire area comprising the parishes of St. James, Hanover, and Westmoreland, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor General for the purposes and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas under the provisions of Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the entire area comprising the parishes of St. James, Hanover, and Westmoreland during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3(4) of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days for the entire time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and the House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Regulation 2019 were laid in the Senate on the 3rd day of May 2019 and in the House of Representatives on the 7th day of May 2019, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency as aforementioned remain and continue in force until the 27th day of January 2020. And whereas it is desirable that the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned remain and continue in force for a period of 3 months until the 27th day of April 2020. And the emergency powers be the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Continuance number 4 Resolution 2019. 2. The state of public emergency declaration by the Governor General by proclamation on the 30th day of April 2019 shall remain in force for a further period of 3 months until the 27th day of April 2020. And 3. The Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 are hereby continued in force until the 27th day of April 2020. Mr. Speaker, I will now read the Emergency Powers number 2, Continuance number 3, Resolution 2019. Whereas by virtue of Section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body or persons of such nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances. And whereas on the 7th day of July 2019, the Governor General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists within parts of the parish of St. Andrew, as specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and hereinafter referred to as the specified community, and further declared that the proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas, under the provisions of Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor General, during a state of public emergency by order, to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers number 2 Regulations 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the specified community during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3(4) of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers number 2 Regulations 2019 were laid in the Senate on the 12th day of July 2019 and in the House of Representatives on the 16th day of July 2019, and whereas it was resolved by the Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency as aforementioned remain and continue in force until the 4th day of January 2020, and whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned remain and continue in force for a period of 3 months until the 4th day of April 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers number 2 Regulations 2019 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers number 2 Continuance number 3 Resolution 2019. 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor General by proclamation on the 7th day of July 2019 shall remain in force for a further 3 months period until the 4th day of April 2020. And 3. The Emergency Powers number 2 Regulations 2019 are hereby continued in force until the 4th day of April 2020. Mr. Speaker, I will now move to the third resolution, the Emergency Powers number 3, Continuance number 3 Resolution 2019. Whereas, by virtue of Section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body or persons of such a nature and so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances. And whereas on the 5th day of September 2019, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the entire area comprising the parish of Clarendon and St. Catherine, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas the provision of Section 3, whereas under the provisions of Section 3.1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him in Section 3.1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers number 3 Regulations 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the entire area comprising the parishes of Clarendon and St. Catherine during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3.4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers number 3 Regulations 2019 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 10th day of September 2019 and in the Senate on the 13th day of September 2019, and whereas it was resolved by the both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency, as aforementioned, remain and continue in force until the 18th day of January 2020. And whereas it is desirable that the state of public emergency declared, as aforementioned, remain and continue in force for a period of 3 months until the 18th day of April 2020. B, the Emergency Powers number 3 Regulations 2019 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers number 3 Continuance number 3 Resolution 2019, and 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor-General by proclamation on the 5th day of September 2019 shall remain in force for a period of 3 months until the 18th day of April 2020. And 3, the Emergency Powers number 3 Regulations 2019 are hereby continued in force until the 18th day of April 2020. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Dr. Chang.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that the next meeting of the House I will move the following 2 motions. The Law Reform
Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period Operation number 6, Order Resolution number 2019. Whereas Section 4 of the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Prime Minister and Council may by order declare any geographically defined area within a single continuous boundary in Jamaica as a zone of special operations for a period of not exceeding 60 days if there are reasonable grounds to believe that due to rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence, and murder and the threat to the rule of law and public order, it is necessary so to do. And whereas in accordance with that section, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, declaration of the Denham Town Community Zone, number 2 order number 2017, and whereas that order provides that the said zone shall operate for a period of 60 days, and whereas Section 5 of the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council, after consultation with the Joint Command, may by order, subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the said period for such further periods, each not exceeding 60 days. And whereas on the 3rd day of December 2019, the Prime Minister and Council made the law reform zone of special operation, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period operation number 6 order 2019. Now therefore be it resolved that by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation number 6 order resolution 2019. The law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period number 6 order 2019 is hereby affirmed. The law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem community and environment in the parish of the St. James Zone, extension of period number 6 order resolution 2019. Whereas Section 4 of the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, Act 2017, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Prime Minister in Council may by order declare any geographically defined area within a single continuous boundary in Jamaica as a zone of special operations for a period not exceeding 60 days if there are reasonable grounds to believe that due to rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence and murder and the threat to the rule of law and public order, it is necessary so to do. And whereas in accordance with that section, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem community and environment in the parish of St. James Zone Order 2017, and whereas that order provides that the said zone shall operate for a period of 60 days, and whereas Section 5 of the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council, after consultation with the Joint Command, may by order, subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the said period, for such periods, each not exceeding 60 days. And whereas on the 2nd day of December 2019, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem community and environment in the parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation number 6 order 2019. Now therefore be resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem community and environment in the parish of St. James
zone of extension of period of operation number 6, Order Resolution 2019. The law reforms zones of special operations, special security, and community development measures, the Mount Salem community and environment in the parish of St. James. Extension of period of operation number 6, Order 2019 is hereby affirmed. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice at a later date, at a later stage, that I will move for the suspension of standing orders in order to enable me to take these motions. Take the other two. No, I have two more. Oh. I take the other two now. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following two motions. First, the United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019 Resolution. Whereas by virtue of subsection 1 of section 2 of the United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make regulations prescribing matters required or permitted by the Act to be prescribed or necessary or convenient to be prescribed for carrying out or giving effect to the Act. And whereas by virtue of subsection 2 of the section 21 of the Act, regulations made under this section may make provisions as to the programs, policies, procedures, and controls to be established and implemented by entities mentioned in section 5.2 of the Act for the purpose of enabling compliance with the Act. And whereas on the 28th of November 2019, the Minister made the United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019, and whereas it is desirable that the United Nations Security Council Resolutions Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019 be affirmed, now therefore be resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019 Resolution. The United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019 are hereby affirmed. United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019. In exercise of the power conferred upon the Minister by Section 21 of the United Nations Security Council Resolution Act, the following regulations are made. Okay. The second Terrorism Prevention Reporting Entities Amendment Regulation 2019. Whereas by virtue of Section 47(1) of the Terrorism Prevention Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make regulations subject to affirmative resolution generally for giving effect to the provision and purpose of this Act. And whereas on the 28th day of November 2019, the Minister made the Terrorism Prevention Reporting Entities Amendment Regulations 2019. And whereas it is desirable that the Terrorism Prevention Reporting Entities Amendment Regulation 2019 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Terrorism Prevention Reporting Entities Amendment Regulation 2019 Resolution. Terrorism Prevention Reporting Entities Amendment Regulations 2019, which were laid on the table of the House on the 3rd day of December 2019, are hereby affirmed. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Start that motion. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business. Mr. Whittle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask that the motion be approved.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Mr. Samuda.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Warmington.
The report of the the Constituency Development Committee report for 2017-2018 before the House. And I want to move for the acceptance of that report. But before that, I just want to get a preview of what we did during that year, and one that the committee review. We had 50 meetings for that period. And during that period, 2017-2018, we had an increase to the allocation to members of parliament from 15 million to 20 million, with an expenditure of 1,263 $1.18 billion for that period for each member of parliament. During that period, the human and social development projects total $729 million. Disaster mitigation, $62 million. Physical infrastructure, $240 million were approved. Economic enablement, $151 million were approved for that period to assist members of parliament. There was a proposal also for the increase to the amount now being allocated to members of parliament. It moved from 15 to 20, but a proposal was made to the Ministry of Finance to increase the 20 million to a figure that would be more comfortable, or a figure that members of parliament have more to deal with in their administration of the constituencies. But that, however, was not approved. We had asked for an increase from the 20 million close to the 40 million that we had before. But the issue is that yes, we start, but then the former Minister of Finance did not support or approve it. But I'm happy to see. So I'm happy to see that at this stage, the former Minister of Finance is in support of an increase. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to see that the former Minister of Finance now support the recommendation of the committee in retreat to increase the amount from 20 to $40 million for members of parliament. So, because at this stage you have a lot of demands and needs in the constituencies, particularly as it relates to education. So the decision was for the 20 million that we now have to be used for these current projects and programs. But for the increase is that another 10 million will be made available to members of parliament for educational projects itself. So each member of parliament would have a minimum of $10 million for education, while they could use from the other allocation on an amount that is compatible to the needs in those constituencies. Because as far as Southwest St. Kitts is concerned, we allocate 50% of the CDF each year. That is $10 million toward education, to ensure that the persons or people or constituents who strive to be educated can be educated. Because I believe that without education there won't be a future. So we put aside all the other needs that there might be, and 50% is toward education. So if the Ministry of Finance now approves the recommendation, it means that the people in Southwest St. Catherine could have up to 20 million for education. So you'll have more, because when you give 50 million to a law student or a medical student, 50,000 rather, to them, and you have over $1 million per year for that tuition, it makes no sense. So we'll have more to assist the talented students in each constituency to go forward. So I hope that the Minister of Finance and Cabinet will look at the recommendation that came out of the recommendation of the committee to increase the amount, that we have an additional $10 million. Because what is said, if you can't increase the 20 million to 40 million, then you give us an additional 10 million towards education. We ask for an additional 10 million if you can increase the 20. So whatever the additional amount of 20 million would be for educational assistance only. Only for education. To educate the future of this country.
So, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the recommendations that came out of the committee that is in this report. And I ask that the House now approve the report from the CDF committee, Constituency Development Committee.
We are asking, is there anybody else speaking on the matter? If not, then we make the matter be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Grange.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, intellectual property is any creation of the human mind. Like tangible property, the creation has a value. And like all other property, needs to be protected. Intellectual property rights gives creators the protection as well as help them to exploit and control their intellectual property. The exclusive right granted is to exclude others from using, manufacturing, distributing inventions, new and original designs, trademarks, etc. There are different types of intellectual property, and it includes patents, which are property rights on an invention, or trademarks, a word, a phrase, a symbol, or a design that distinguishes the source of products or services, such as a mark on a design by a particular sport manufacturer. And of course, there is copyright, which is specific to the expression of ideas in visual or audio form. Our copyright legislation, Mr. Speaker, is already in place, though it requires some amendments. But that I will treat with at another time. So today, after a long gestation, the Patent and Designs Bill is here before us, and it is my pleasure to support the passage of this bill. Intellectual property rights protection is the cornerstone of all successful economies. We're all knowingly and unknowingly beneficiaries of technologies and inventions that have made our lives easier. All of these have one common thread: intellectual property. The passage of this bill, which focuses on two critical areas, inventors and creators of designs, will allow Jamaican inventors and designers to be able to compete on an equal footing on the world stage by being beneficiaries of a law that will grant them access to two international treaties. Those treaties are, one, the Patent Corporation Treaty, the PCT, and two, the Hague Agreement for the International Registration of Industrial Designs, the Hague System. The Patent Corporation Treaty would simplify the procedure for registration of patents in multiple jurisdictions, while the Hague System simplifies the procedure for registration of designs in multiple jurisdictions. Mr. Speaker, this means that once Jamaica accedes to the PCT and the Hague System, Jamaican inventors and creators of designs would be able to have much easier access to registration and protection in the states that are party to this agreement. In the area of inventions, which would be protected under the PCT, there are 153 member states where Jamaicans could indicate their interest in having their inventions protected and not be subject to multiple charges, but rather be able to obtain the protection through one registration, which would designate multiple locations. A similar situation would obtain under the Hague system, which would result in lower transaction costs for design registrations through the design registration through the creation of a single application in one language with one set of fees and access to registration in 90 member states. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm using this opportunity to indicate that as Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, I continue to advocate for all our creatives to not only get the critical recognition they deserve for their creations, but that they are able to protect their IPR and earn from their creativity to uplift themselves, their families, their communities, and Jamaica. So I want to say, let us continue to put in the work to ensure that the protection of our creatives, and that each creative person is fairly compensated for his or her work. Let us continue to work hard to build a Jamaica that appreciates their value, respects their work and creations, enables them to achieve their dreams, and empowers them to contribute to building Jamaica. I believe we are now positioned for enhanced global competitiveness, increased income for practitioners, and sustainable prosperity for our country. Mr. Speaker, one of our proudest achievements was the inscription of the reggae music of Jamaica to the UNESCO representative list of intangible cultural heritage. We celebrated the first anniversary of that achievement on November 29, last Friday. And tonight, we launch Reggae Month and unveil the plans for its celebration in the month of February next year. And Mr. Speaker, you and the entire House is invited to join us at the Pegasus tonight. As I close, I want to indicate that the passage of this bill today is another significant achievement and signals to our international partners that Jamaica is serious about doing business and, more importantly, Mr. Speaker, about intellectual property rights protection. I'm proud to stand here this afternoon and support the passage of this bill, and I want to commend the Minister and his team for finally taking this legislation to Parliament. Thank you very much.
I don't need that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member from Central St. Catherine, Minister, for her contribution. And just to repeat, Mr. Speaker, because I think it is important in closing this debate, it's important that I repeat that the Patents and Designs Bill is to reform the law relating to patents and designs, which were previously in two bills. And it is repealing the current Patent Act and the current Designs Act, which were enacted in 1857 and 1937, respectively. I need to repeat that. 1857 and 1937, respectively. See how old and outdated those acts are. And that adds to the significance of this event and this new act, Mr. Speaker. And thus, this new act, it's important also to point out that this new law, which comprises provisions relating to the law of patents and designs, as the deficiencies in the current acts, the two of them, have actually precluded Jamaica's involvement in international arrangements, as both laws were lacking in the requisite level of protection, as mentioned by the Minister, and application that is consistent with international norms and practices in the field of patents and designs. And so, Mr. Speaker, it's important, as I close this debate, that I point out that the Patents and Designs Bill will now fulfill Jamaica's international obligations in relation to patents and designs pursuant to the Paris Convention for the Protection of Industrial Property, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, and the Hague Agreement. It will also reflect the requirements of the Agreement on the trade-related aspects of intellectual property and the bilateral, this is key, the bilateral arrangement between Jamaica and the United States of America, because I should point out that Ambassador Tapia had publicly indicated the concern that they had about the need for this bill. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that, I want to thank the member for her contribution, and I know that it is by no means a controversial bill, because it is something that is vitally important for Jamaica. So, Mr. Speaker, I now beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. Clarke.
A bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Patent Act and the Designs Act and to make new provisions relating to patents and designs and for related matters, read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Half a house.
The appropriate part of the House will now resolve itself. What have we done now?
It finished now?
Thank you.
Members, do we have any amendments?
No amendments, Mr. Chairman.
I put clause 1. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put clause 2 to 3. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 1, clause 4 to 8. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 3, clause 9 to 27. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 4, clauses 28 to 35.
Aye.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 5, clauses 36 to 43. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 6, clauses 44 to 51. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 7, clauses 52 to 57. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 8, clauses 58 to 61. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 9, clauses 62 to 74. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 10, clauses 75 to 80. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 11, clauses 81 to 98. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 12, clauses 99 to 111. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 13, clauses 112 to 113. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put part 14, clauses 114 to 127. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put the first schedule. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put the second schedule. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. The question is that I do report that the bill having passed committee stage without any amendment. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it.
I know. I'm not turning it off.
Babsy.
Members, I do report the bill having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
Clarke. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it.
A bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Patent Act and the Designs Act and to make new provisions relating to patents and designs and for related matters read a third time and passed.
It is not intended to do any further business today, so I invite you to adjourn this Honorable House until next week, Tuesday, December the 10th at 2 p.m.
The motion is that the House be now adjourned until next week, the 10th at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. This House now stands adjourned.
Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the motion to adjourn, I invite you to reconvene Parliament in order to take a very important motion. Wait, no man, I can't do two things at the same time. Thank you very much. I didn't really.
As Parliament resume its sitting.
I seek leave of the House to permit the House to reconvene in order to take a matter that has been just brought to our attention of great national importance.
Those in favor? Those against? Yes, of it. Dr. Chang.
382. 4810.
Uncertain business. Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motion, note of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? Yes, of it.
Mr. Speaker, I'll take the Terrorism Prevention Reporting Entities Amendment Regulation 2019 first. Mr. Speaker, the TPA regulations were approved by this Honourable House on Tuesday, November 26. However, that version contained errors. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, who sits on the other House, signed the corrected version of TPA regulations on November 28. They were tabled and taken in the other House last Friday, 29th, and now before us to be affirmed. This must be done to be in order to meet the requirements of the making of regulations under the Terrorism Prevention Act, and this version of the TPA regulations, which are final, will supersede those approved in this House on November 26. The amendments will now take clause by clause analysis, Mr. Speaker. Amendment of Regulation 2 of the Principal Regulations. This clause amends Regulation 2, interpretation of the Principal Regulation by deleting the definitions of competent authority and designated authority from the regulations. Both definitions have now been placed in the interpretation section of the TPA. Amendments of Regulation 5 of the Principal Regulation. This clause amends Regulation 5 of the Principal Regulations by inserting an additional subparagraph 2 which clarifies that evidence of the applicant's identity is satisfactory, and if it is reliable evidence of the which is derived from an independent source. This provision seeks to ensure that there is reliable evidence of the identity of a customer from an independent source before business is conducted. This implement aspects of customer due diligence, CDD requirements of the FATF Recommendation 10. Amendment of Regulation 60 of the Principal Regulation. This clause implements the requirements for a risk-based approach as required by FATF recommendations. It amends Regulation 6A by deleting this current paragraph 1 and substituting new paragraph. The new paragraph 1 stipulates that a business in the regulated sector must establish a risk profile relating to its operation generally, and that such risk profile shall have regard to the following areas of its business: business products offered, its distribution channels, the national, regional, and international environment in which the regulated business operates, and the size and nature of business operations. The paragraph further provides that the regulated business is mandated to establish a risk profile in respect of all its business relationships, one-off transactions are high risk. It's also the duty to employ measures commensurate with the risk that is identified in the bid to effectively mitigate those risks. However, the business in question must not apply simplified due diligence procedures in respect of a business relationship or one-off transaction which the regulated business knows or believes or has reasonable grounds to know or believe is related to money laundering or to terrorism financing. Paragraph 2 of the Regulation 6A is being amended to include subparagraph E, which provides that relationships or transactions which are high risk include any case where the applicant for a business concern is not the ultimate beneficial owner of the assets relevant to the business relationship or one-off transaction. Paragraph 3.4, paragraph 5B of Regulation 6A is amended to indicate that enhanced due diligence procedures shall require verification of the source of funds and wealth held by the inter alia the applicant for business. Prior to this proposed amendment, the regulations required the verification of the source of funds or wealth. The amendment is therefore intended to ensure that compliance with FATF requirement to verify both the source of funds and the source of wealth for the applicable transaction. Regulation 6A is being amended to include new paragraph 5A. 5D, paragraph 5A qualifies paragraph 1 of this regulation, which stipulates that in respect of high-risk matters, simple due diligence procedures ought not to be applied. To this end, paragraph 5A specifically states that where it has been determined that a business relationship or one-off transaction is low risk, a business is in the regulated sector, may, with the written approval of the competent authority, apply simplified due diligence procedures to the low-risk business relationship or one-off transaction. It should be noted that the BOJ and the FSC have designated as competent authorities under such section, under Section 18.5 of the TPA since 2015. Paragraph 5B of the Regulation 6A prescribes, in respect of the written approval indicated in paragraph 5A, the matters about which the competent authority must be satisfied before granting the written approval, or, for example, the regulated business had conducted a proper evaluation of the risk, the result of which justified the adoption of a simplified due diligence procedure, and that the regulated business had identified and documented the risk of money laundering involved and had undertaken to inter alia implement appropriate controls and systems to reduce or mitigate those risks, as well as review the risks identified, and the relevant controls and systems with a view to reduce or mitigate the identified risks on an ongoing basis. Paragraph 5C of the Regulation 6A authorizes the competent authority to impose any condition that it considers appropriate in its written approval, which is granted pursuant to paragraph B. Paragraph 5D of the Regulation 6A provides that in relation to paragraph 5A, simplified due diligence procedures, including any one or more of the 5 procedures listed therein. These procedures include requiring that the applicant for the business concerned provide only one form of a government-issued identification, or other forms of identification other than government-issued identifications, as well as receiving identification verification from third parties who are under similar obligations as the applicant in relation to customer identification and transaction verification procedures regarding the prevention of terrorism financing. Subparagraph E indicates that the competent authority may specify other procedures that are to be utilized as simplified due diligence procedures. Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that in this section of the amendments, specifically Regulation 5B, 5BC, and 5DB, there were typographical errors which referred to money laundering instead of terrorism financing. This has now been addressed in the regulations which are here before this Honourable House, page 3 and 4. Insertion of the new Regulation 6B of Principal Regulations. This clause deals with enhanced due diligence measures and special countermeasures which should be taken in relation to the business relationship or transaction with persons listed under Regulation 6A, 2, and 3, or an applicant for business resident in jurisdiction which have been designated as higher risk in public statements from the FATF. Recommendation 19. The amendment provides for the insertion of a new Regulation 6B, which empowers the competent authority to direct the business in the regulated sector to apply enhanced due diligence procedures stipulated by Regulation 6A.5, as well as direct that relevant reports required by these regulations be provided at more frequent intervals in respect of the following: and the business relationship or transaction with any class or category of person not being the ultimate beneficial owner of the assets concerned, the business relationship or self or one-off transaction, or any applicant for business, resident or domiciled in territory in respect of which there is a greater associated risk of money laundering or terrorist financing. Such territory being specified in the list published by notice in the Gazette. Amendment of Regulation 11 of Principal Regulation. Regulation 11 of the Principal Regulation is being amended in paragraph 2 to mandate the reporting entity takes reasonable regulatory measures for the purpose of verifying and identifying the identity of the principal and the agent, and verifying that the agent is authorized to act on behalf of the principal. In respect of a business relationship or one-off transaction, where a person is or appears to be an agent, this amendment implements the FATF requirement to verify the identity of all parties for a transaction, even where the parties are not apparent or disclosed as part of the customer due diligence requirements. Amendment of Regulation 13 of the Principal Regulations. Regulation 13 of the Principal Regulations contains the supplementary provisions for identification procedures. It is being amended to clarify the threshold for evidence of identity. Under the current regulation, it provides that the threshold for evidence of identity is satisfied if the evidence is reasonably capable of establishing that the applicant for business is the person that the applicant claims to be. However, the new amendments to Regulation 13, specifically paragraph 1A and B, state evidence of identity is satisfactory where the evidence is reasonably capable of establishing that the applicant for business and all persons on whose behalf that applicant acts concerning that business are the person that the applicant must claim to be. The person in receipt of the evidence is reasonably satisfied that the evidence of identity establishes the fact that the applicant for the business and all persons on whose behalf the applicant acts concerning that business are the person that the applicant claims them to be. 6.2 Regulation 13 is also being amended to include a new subparagraph C under Regulation 13.1 This new insertion dictates that evidence of identity is satisfactory where in the case of an insurance contract, the evidence identifies and verifies the identity of the beneficiary. Paragraph 1C2 of Regulation 13 is being amended to direct that evidence of identity is satisfactory if in relation to a transaction involving a person that is not an individual, it identifies and verifies the identity of the individual who exercises ultimate effective control of the person. Paragraph 1C3 of Regulation 13 addresses the identification procedures of body corporate, which includes the requirements to provide evidence of incorporation. The provision is, however, being amended to exclude body corporate listed on stock exchange from the due diligence requirements. Currently, these bodies corporate are exempted from customary due diligence measures because comprehensive records on body corporate of this type are maintained at the stock exchange. Paragraph 1C3 of Regulation 13 is further amended by deleting subparagraph A and replacing it with the obligation to identify and verify the identity of the individuals who hold 10% or more of ownership of that person that is a body corporate and the individuals who exercise ultimate effective control over the person. Currently, the principal regulations require identification procedures to be applied with respect to the directors and shareholders, if any, who hold 10% or more of the voting rights. The aim of this amendment is to ensure that there is identification and verification of identity of all persons who have a substantial interest in or who may exercise control of body corporate. Amendment of Regulation 18 of the Principal Regulations. Regulation 18 of the Principal Regulation is being amended by deleting subparagraph A and B of paragraph 3 and replacing the same with new subparagraphs which impose a duty on reporting entities to ensure that their overseas branches and subsidiaries advise them of circumstances in which they are unable to conform to specified standards and conduct under the Act, under regulations, as well as appropriate measures applied by such branches and subsidiaries to minimize the risk of terrorism financing posed to regulated business. Consequent on which the regulated businesses are tasked with advising the competent authority of their stated inability, the reasons for the inability, and the measures taken to minimize the risk of terrorism financing posed to regulated business. This clause contained two typographical errors. The first was an inaccurate reference to the subsection to be deleted, that is paragraph 18.3 instead of 18.2. This resulted in a consequential amendment which had referred to Regulation 18.3 and now speaks to subparagraph 4. The second error is a reference to money laundering rather than terrorism financing in Regulation 18.3a(b). The latter is due to the fact that provision is taken from the poker regulations. The proposed regulations also seek to amend paragraph 4 by deleting the same and stipulating that a person who contravenes this regulation commits an offense and the person is an individual who has been convicted by the parish code, that person shall be liable to a fine not exceeding $3 million or imprisonment of not more than 3 years or both. Fine and imprisonment and or if convicted by the circuit court, the individual will be liable to pay a fine or be imprisoned for a term of not more than 20 years. On the other hand, where a body corporate has been convicted by a parish court, it will be liable to a fine not exceeding $5 million, and in respect of circuit court, a fine which will be determined by the court. The penalty of $5 million for bodies corporate for conviction before a parish court has been adjusted in line with the fines set out in Poker Regulation 2019. I move for the affirmation of the regulation. No, second one. Mr. Speaker, I move for the affirmation. The second one, I move for the affirmation of that. Mr. Speaker. And do both? No.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it.
Mr. Speaker, I will start for the second motion. The regulation before this Honorable, the United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019. The regulation before this Honorable House may be cited as United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Reporting Entities Regulation 2019, hereinafter referred to as UNSCRIA regulations. Section 21 of the United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Amendment Act empowers the Minister to make regulations. This Honorable House will recall that in June 2015, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force assessed Jamaica's compliance with international standards on combating money laundering and the financing of terrorism and proliferation. The assessment was undertaken in accordance with CFATF's mandate to combat money laundering and terrorism in the wider Caribbean, and a manner similar to that of Financial Action Task Force operates at the international level. Following this assessment, Jamaica restructured the regulations so the competent authority, designated authority, prescribed person or entity. Regulation 3 concerns duty of person to observe guidance issued by the designated authority, competent authority, or body that regulates or is representative of any trade, profession. Once the report is received, Regulation 6 stipulates that the designated authority ought to issue a receipt to the issuing entity in respect of the report. It must, however, be noted that the fact of issuance of a receipt does not signify that the reporting entity is in compliance with the regulations pertaining to the content of the relevant report. Regulation 6.1. This regulation stipulates that every reporting entity has a duty to ensure that its branches and subsidiaries which are situated outside of Jamaica implement and conform to the provisions of these regulations. 6.2 Regulation 7 also provides for a duty to comply with the higher standard where there is a difference between the applicable standard in which the reporting entity is located and the applicable standards of the jurisdiction where its branches or subsidiaries are located. Important international branches. Regulation 8. This regulation indicates that in making a report in respect of a possession or control of assets owned or controlled by or on behalf of a proscribed entity, the reporting entity ought to comply with the directions of the designated authority that may be given. It is noted that such direction may include but not be limited to previous or current reports, provision of requisite information in such reports, and additional information relating to queries relating to specific matters arising from the reports. In relation to additional information concerning specific matters arising from the reports, Regulation 8 further stipulates that the queries may relate to due diligence, procedures undertaken in respect of a particular transaction, or persons authorized to sign an account that is being queried. Direction may also be given in respect of errors identified in the paper reports. 7.2. This clause further articulates that where a reporting entity fails to comply with the direction given by the designated authority, the entity commits an offense, and when an individual is convicted, such individual is liable upon conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $3 million or a term not exceeding 3 years, or both penalties. And where a body corporate is convicted, a fine not exceeding $5 million, similar to TPA regulations, the penalty for conviction by a body corporate before the parish court has now been aligned by the one contained by the poker regulations. 8. Regulation 9. 8.1 Regulation 9 provides for the activities that shall be undertaken by the competent authority. Such activities include but are not limited to the A. Exercising of its functions with the aim of monitoring compliance of the reporting entities with the regulations. B. Issuance of guidelines regarding effective measures for reporting entities to take to preclude the commission of relevant offenses. C. Establishment of measures, for example, conducting or directing a third party to conduct inspections or necessary verification procedures. D. Issuance of directions to a reporting entity, which may require the reporting entity to take measures to ensure that it is not in possession or control of property owned or controlled by or on behalf of a proscribed person or entity. E. Examination and taking of copies of information or documents in the possession or control of any reporting entity relating to the operations of the reporting entity. Regulation 9, that's A2, Regulation 9 expressly stipulates that the last requirement should not be construed as requiring an attorney at law to disclose any information or advice that is subject to legal professional privilege. Legal professional privilege cannot, however, be relied on where information or other matter is communicated or given with the intention of furthering a criminal purpose. 8.3. In this regulation, the reference to subparagraph E should have been 1. E. This has now been addressed. Regulation 9 further mandates that it is an offense for a reporting entity to not comply with any requirement or direction issued to it under the regulation by the competent authority. The reporting entity which commits an offense will therefore be liable on conviction to pay a fine of up to $3 million in respect of the parish court, and in respect of the circuit court, a fine which will be determined by the relevant judge of the circuit court. I move for the affirmation of these regulations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it.
I thank my colleagues.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for your indulgences and your patience, and therefore I now ask that you adjourn this Honourable House until next week, Tuesday, at 2 p.m.
The motion is that the House be now adjourned. Do we put the motion? Do you put the motion? The motion is that the House be now adjourned until next week, Tuesday, at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.
Defining challenge of the 21st century. According to some, it's the greatest threat now facing the human race.
By the middle of next century, the warming will be at a level which the Earth has not experienced since